The release of Rambo: First Blood Part 2 in 1985 marked a monumental shift in the character's cinematic identity and political function. The original 1982 film, First Blood, was a deeply psychological thriller, a somber, intense study of a Vietnam veteran, John Rambo, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and alienation, driven to violence only when provoked by systemic cruelty. It featured one accidental death and a profound emotional breakdown. The sequel, however, abandoned the nuance and psychological complexity of the original in favor of unapologetic, high-octane Cold War-era revenge fantasy. The new archetype. Rambo was transformed from a tragic anti-hero into a hyper-competent, muscle-bound one-man army. This change perfectly captured the spirit of the mid-1980s American cinema, where themes of masculinity, military power, and unilateral action dominated the action genre, alongside films like Commando and Missing in Action. Rewriting history. The film became one of the most visible cultural expressions of the reimagining of the Vietnam War. It catered to a popular, though politically charged narrative that America hadn't lost the war, but had been betrayed by politicians and bureaucrats who failed to fight effectively and who subsequently abandoned American prisoners of war, POWs. Rambo's mission was not merely rescue, it was a chance for cinematic national redemption. 1.2. The POW MIA issue and public anxiety. The film tapped directly into the potent and highly emotional POW MIA issue. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the persistent, largely unsubstantiated belief that hundreds of American servicemen were still being held captive in Southeast Asia fueled significant public anxiety and political debate. The emotional core. The idea of American heroes being left behind provided the emotional fuel for the sequel's entire plot. Rambo, himself a former POW who was tortured, becomes the perfect symbolic figure to return and rectify this historical injustice. His mission is seen by the audience as a morally necessary quest to finish the war that the politicians had prematurely ended. Refusal of orders. The film's narrative, where Rambo is explicitly ordered only to document the POWs, not rescue them, serves to villainize the bureaucratic elements in the U.S. government, represented by Marshal Murdoch. This narrative choice validates Rambo's eventual deviation from orders, confirming the conspiracy theory that the U.S. government was actively preventing the return of its own soldiers. 2.0. The Creative War. Cameron versus Stallone. 2.1. James Cameron's original vision. The initial screenplay for Rambo: First Blood Part 2 was written by James Cameron, who at the time had not yet released The Terminator. Cameron's draft, titled First Blood 2: The Mission, was reportedly a more character-driven action thriller that retained more of the original film's emotional DNA. The Psychiatric Ward. Cameron's script began with Colonel Troutman finding Rambo not in a prison rock quarry, but in a veteran's psychiatric hospital, emphasizing the psychological toll of the first film's events. The Sidekick. Cameron originally included a humorous, tech-savvy sidekick to accompany Rambo. This character was intended to balance Rambo's intense stoicism and provide dialogue, a common feature of Cameron's subsequent works, like Aliens. The POW depth. Cameron's script included more detailed backstories for the POWs, intending to flesh them out as victims and individuals rather than just thematic props. 2.2. Stallone's radical transformation of the script. Upon the success of First Blood and Rocky III, Stallone had immense creative power and took over the script revisions, ultimately transforming Cameron's draft into the film we know. Stallone's rewrites were driven by his desire for simplicity, action, and political punch. No humorous sidekick. Stallone vetoed the sidekick, reportedly feeling that the sidekick would overshadow Rambo and take all the best lines. The final film replaced the humorous partner with the tragic love interest, Ko-Bao. Simpler narrative. Stallone drastically cut the POW backstories and the psychological complexity, aiming for a tighter, faster narrative focused purely on the mission and the action. Cameron famously quipped that the POWs might as well have been a six-pack of beer. The politics. Cameron claimed that he wrote the action, but Stallone wrote the politics. Stallone inserted the explicit, emotionally charged dialogue that positioned the U.S. bureaucrats as the true villains and elevated the POW MIA issue to the central theme of government betrayal. 3.0. The Betrayal and the Mission. 3.1. The Assignment and the Orders. The film opens with John Rambo, Stallone, working hard labor in a prison rock quarry following the events in Hope, Washington. He's approached by his former commander, Colonel Sam Troutman, Richard Crenna, who offers him a deal, freedom in exchange for undertaking a top-secret mission in Vietnam. Rambo is flown to a remote U.S. base in Thailand and is briefed by Marshal Murdoch, a shady, bureaucratic figure in charge of the operation. The False Mission. Murdoch informs Rambo that the mission is strictly reconnaissance. Rambo is only to photograph the suspected POW camp to confirm the presence of American prisoners. He is given strict, explicit orders not to engage the enemy or attempt a rescue. The plan is to send a large extraction force after Rambo brings back photo confirmation. The Lost Gear. During his parachute insertion over Vietnam, Rambo's rigging snags, forcing him to cut loose most of his high-tech equipment, leaving him with only his iconic knife and the compound bow with explosive-tipped arrows. This immediate loss of technology is a classic trope, forcing the hero to rely solely on his primal Green Beret skills. 3.2. Infiltration, Betrayal, and Capture. Rambo is met by his on-the-ground contact, the Vietnamese operative Co Quang Bao. Co guides Rambo upriver to the location of the camp. The Deviation. Upon infiltrating the camp, Rambo immediately discovers a prisoner tied to a cross and being tortured. He instinctively disobeys orders and rescues the POW, Banks, and another prisoner. This single act of compassion seals his fate with Murdoch. The Extract Fail. Rambo contacts the extraction point, but Murdoch, seeing Rambo has a live POW, orders the helicopter pilot to abort the extraction, fearing the political complications of a successful rescue. Rambo and the POW are abandoned. Capture and Torture. Rambo and Banks are captured by the Vietnamese camp commander, Captain Vinh, who is working with the Soviet military. Rambo is tortured by the sadistic Soviet liaison officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sergei Podovsky, and his brutal henchman, Sergeant Yushin. The torture sequence, including the use of electric shocks and being submerged in a leech pit, directly links Rambo back to his own POW trauma, fueling his later explosive rage. 4.0. Box Office, Rating, and Initial Reception. 4.1. Commercial Juggernaut. Rambo First Blood Part 2 was a colossal commercial success, dwarfing the earnings of the first film and cementing Stallone's position as the world's highest-grossing action star. Global earnings, the film grossed over $300 million worldwide against a budget of approximately $44 million, making it the highest-grossing film in the entire Rambo franchise. Opening weekend. It had a massive opening weekend of over $25 million domestically, demonstrating the high demand for the film's particular brand of patriotic action. Cultural impact. The film's commercial success was proof that the American public embraced the politically charged high-action approach to the sequel, cementing the shift from the character-driven drama of the original to the spectacular, politicalized revenge fantasy. 4.2. Critical backlash and the Razzie sweep. Despite its commercial triumph, the film was largely dismissed by critics, who chastised it for abandoning the thoughtful themes of the original in favor of cartoonish violence and simplistic politics. Critical consensus, the film was dubbed a jingoistic propaganda, praised only for its action set pieces and special effects. It was criticized for simplifying the complex political history of the Vietnam War into a good versus evil story of American heroes against evil Soviet and Vietnamese communists. The Razzie Awards, the film swept the 1986 Golden Raspberry Awards, Razzies, receiving nominations and winning several categories, including Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Sylvester Stallone, and Worst Original Song, Peace in Our Life, written by Frank Stallone. This stark contrast between mass audience love and critical scorn perfectly encapsulated the film's polarizing nature. The entire middle section of Rambo First Blood Part 2 is dedicated to the systematic dismantling of Rambo's character vulnerabilities, culminating in his complete transformation into the unstoppable killing machine. The catalyst for this final switch is the death of Co-Bao, Julia Nixon. The tragic romance. Co-Bao serves as Rambo's only human connection in Vietnam. She understands his mission, respects his warrior code, and provides the briefest glimmer of a normal life Rambo might return to. After Rambo successfully escapes torture and captures a helicopter, he and Co share a powerful moment where she speaks of her dreams of a future with him. The snub of betrayal. Co is ambushed and killed by a Vietnamese patrol just before Rambo can escape. Her death, a direct consequence of the escalating conflict and Murdoch's initial betrayal, strips Rambo of his last anchor to humanity and the life he was fighting to reclaim. This singular event unleashes Rambo's full, unbridled, and politically motivated wrath. The iconic setup. Rambo returns to his lost equipment, arms himself with his massive knife, the explosive-tipped arrows, and the ubiquitous M60 machine gun. The famous image of Rambo shirtless, bandoliered, and primed for combat is born in this sequence, the perfect cinematic image of an American warrior betrayed and finally given permission to win this time. 5.2. The Jungle War, Rambo's Revenge Rampage. The final act is a relentless display of guerrilla warfare, demonstrating Rambo's supreme mastery of jungle combat, which contrasts sharply with the psychological horror of the first film. Guerrilla tactics. Rambo utilizes his Green Beret training with deadly efficiency, using traps, stealth, and his terrain knowledge to turn the dense Vietnamese jungle, filmed expertly in Acapulco, Mexico, into his personal weapon. He used the iconic compound bow with explosive arrows, a visual that became synonymous with the character and symbolized his shift from a mere soldier to a primal, mythic hunter. The body count. In a direct inversion of First Blood's single accidental death, Rambo First Blood Part 2 boasts a massive on-screen and implied body count, estimated to be well over 60. This was the commercial formula for 1980s action cinema. The hero's success is directly proportional to the number of enemies eliminated. The helicopter showdown. The climax involves a spectacular duel between Rambo, flying a captured Soviet helicopter, and the main antagonist, Lieutenant Colonel Podofsky, flying his own gunship. This sequence provided the necessary over-the-top spectacle the audience craved, culminating in Rambo's decisive and fiery victory over the Soviet threat. 6.0. Behind the Scenes and Technical Mastery. 6.1. Director George P. Cosmatos and the Aesthetic. The film was directed by George P. Cosmatos, who later directed Stallone in Cobra and Tombstone. Cosmatos was known for his slick, visually dynamic approach to action. High visual style. Cosmatos, working with the legendary cinematographer Jack Cardiff, created a visually distinct aesthetic. The lush, humid, tropical environment was captured using anamorphic widescreen, emphasizing the scale of the jungle and the solitary nature of Rambo's mission. The option is filmed with dynamic camera movement, prioritizing clarity and impact. Overcoming challenges. Filming in the Mexican jungle, Acapulco, Guerrero, and Oaxaca, was challenging due to the tropical heat and a hurricane that damaged sets. Many intense close-ups of Stallone preparing his gear were reportedly shot in a hotel room during the storm. The final helicopter fight, originally planned with the helicopter hanging from a crane, was moved to the ground after a crane chain broke, forcing the crew to use wind machines and lighting to simulate flight. 6.2. Stunts and Practical Effects. The massive action sequences relied almost entirely on practical effects and pyrotechnics, which was the standard for high-budget 80s action cinema. The explosions. The film is famous for its massive explosions, particularly those caused by the explosive arrows and the final destruction of the enemy base. The use of real pyrotechnics lent a weight and realism to the destruction that subsequent CGI-heavy films often lack. Stallone's commitment. Stallone performed many of his own intense stunts, including the dramatic dive into the river from a burning boat, which had to be done in coffee-dyed water to simulate the murky Vietnamese river. His commitment to physical performance was central to selling Rambo as a truly formidable warrior. 7.0 Awards, Legacy, and the Final Speech. 7.1 Accolades, the duality of critical and technical recognition. Rambo First Blood Part 2's polarizing nature is best seen in its awards record. Worst Picture, Razzie winner, the film's political stance and shift away from the original's drama earned it the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Picture, among others, symbolizing the critical community's rejection. Oscar nomination, Sound Effects Editing. Paradoxically, the film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Sound Effects Editing. This nomination recognizes the superb technical craftsmanship involved in capturing and designing the film's intense, immersive soundscape of jungle warfare, gun battles, and explosions. 7.2 The Unforgettable Final Monologue. The film culminates not in an action sequence, but in an explosive dialogue between Rambo and the treacherous Marshall Murdoch. Rambo confronts Murdoch at the base, holding him at gunpoint and delivering a powerful, politically charged speech. The political core. Rambo's famous demand, "Sir, you know there's more men out there, don't you? Answer me," followed by his smashing of the communication equipment, is the film's definitive political statement. The government is the enemy of the soldier. The winning quote. Rambo's final emotional plea to Troutman encapsulates the film's central theme. "I want what every other guy who came over here and spilled his guts and gave everything he had wants, for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's what I want." This speech transformed Rambo into the voice of the Vietnam veteran, a cinematic martyr demanding recognition and justice. 7.3 The Enduring Cultural Legacy. Rambo First Blood Part 2 redefined the action genre for the 1980s and beyond. The archetype. It established the modern one-man army archetype, the highly skilled single warrior who fights against overwhelming odds, often against the explicit wishes of the corrupt government. This archetype dominated action cinema for the next decade. Political action. It proved that blockbuster action films could successfully tap into current political anxieties and effectively rewrite historical narratives, the "we get to win this time" phenomenon. Parody and influence. The film's iconic look, the headband, the bow, the muscular physique, became instantly recognizable, leading to countless parodies, Hot Shots Part 2, and inspiring a generation of action films worldwide. The film stands today as a commercial and cultural landmark, a film that sacrificed complexity for spectacular vengeance, but in doing so created one of the most recognizable cinematic icons in history.